That one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy here, riding solo on this one. I want to thank you for returning to another episode. Today I'm going to do something a little different and kind of talk more about just Texas. A little history, a little past. We'll talk about a little bit of the present and put it in context around what we would like to see the future be. I'm going to start it out, though, with what's becoming a kind of a traditional segment, if you will, of the podcast, and that's where we start with the past. So a little Texas history. I'm recording this episode on September 19th, and actually today in Texas history, on September 19th in 1863, the Texans fight at Chickamauga. So on this day in 1863, the two-day Battle of Chickamauga began, ending in one of the last great field victories for the Confederacy. The first day's action, fought in densely wooded terrain, became a classic soldiers' battle, in which generalship counted for little, and the outcome was decided by fierce small-unit encounters. Texas units in the Georgia Battalion included Hood's Texas Brigade, Ector's Brigade, Deschler's Brigade, and Terry's Texas Rangers. As Hood's brigade went into battle, they called to a regiment of exhausted Tennesseans, "Rise up, Tennesseans, and see the Texans go in." When they in turn came staggering back from the woods, after being repulsed by Union cavalry, a Tennessean was waiting to yell, "Rise up, Tennesseans, and see the Texans come out." Among the Texas casualties in the battle were General James Deschler, who was killed, and John Bell Hood, who lost a leg. So that got me wondering what's a little more of the history behind Hood's Texas Brigade. So I'll read a little bit about that, what I found, which is interesting. So Hood's Texas Brigade was organized on October 22nd, 1861 in Richmond, Virginia. It was initially commanded by Brigadier General Lewis T. Wigfall and composed of the 1st, 4th, and 5th Texas Infantry Regiments, the only Texas troops to fight in the Eastern Theater. The 1st was commanded by Wigfall and Lieutenant Colonel Hugh McLeod, the 4th by Colonel John Bell Hood and Lieutenant Colonel John Marshall, and the 5th by Colonel James J. Archer and Lieutenant Jerome B. Robertson. On November 20th, 1861, the 18th Georgia Infantry, commanded by William T. Wooford, was attached. On June 1st, 1862, 8 infantry companies from Wade Hampton, South Carolina Legion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Martin W. Gary, were added. And in November 1862, the 3rd Arkansas Infantry, commanded by Colonel Van H. Manning, joined the brigade. Both the Georgia and South Carolina units were transferred out in November 1862, but the 3rd Arkansas remained until the end of the war. Wigfall resigned command of the brigade on February 20th, 1862, and on March 2nd, Texas Independence Day, Hood was promoted to brigadier general and placed in command. Because of his daring leadership, the brigade became known as Hood's Texas Brigade. despite his brief service of only 6 months as commander. The brigade served throughout the war in Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and in James Longstreet's First Corps. It participated in at least 24 battles in 1862, including Eltham's Landing, Gaines's Mill, 2nd Manassas, and Sharpsburg, otherwise known as Antietam. In October, the 3rd Arkansas Regiment replaced the 18th Georgia and Hampton's Legion. On November 1, 1862, Brigadier General Jerome B. Robertson became brigade commander, and Hood was elevated to command of the division in which the Texas Brigade operated. In April 1863, the brigade moved to North Carolina. In May, it rejoined Lee's army, and on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, it took part in the Battle of Gettysburg. In Georgia, the brigade fought on September 19th and 20th at Chickamauga, where Hood was wounded and forced to leave his division, ending his official connection with the brigade. In Tennessee, the brigade joined in the sieges of Chattanooga and Knoxville. General John Gregg became commander when the brigade returned to Virginia in February 1864. In the Battle of the Wilderness, General Lee personally led the Texans in one of the charges. After Gregg was killed in October, the brigade was temporarily led by Colonel Clinton M. Winkler and Colonel F.S. Bass. At the surrender at Appomattox on April 10, 1865, Colonel Robert M. Powell commanded the brigade, Captain W.T. Hill, the 5th Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel C.M. Winkler, the 4th, Colonel F.S. Bass, the 1st, Lieutenant Colonel R.S. Taylor, the 3rd Arkansas. It is estimated that at the beginning of the war, the Texas regiments comprised about 3,500 men, and that during the war, recruits increased the number to almost 4,400. The brigade sustained a 61% casualty rate, and at its surrender numbered close to 600 officers and men. It was praised by Generals Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, James Longstreet, and Robert E. Lee, and by high officials of the Confederacy. The Hood's Brigade Association was organized on May 14, 1872. 63 reunions were held between that date and 1933, when the last 2 physically able veterans, E.W.B. Leach and Sam O. Moody, both 91, met for the last time in Houston. Through the efforts of the association, a monument in memory of the brigade was erected on the South Drive of the Capitol in Austin on October 27, 1910. The monument is a 35-foot marble shaft with a bronze statue of a brigade infantryman on top, mounted on a 16-foot base carved with the names of all the battles fought by the brigade. The association was reactivated at Hill Junior College in the summer of 1966 with a membership of Hood's Brigade descendants. It's an activity of the Texas Heritage Museum at Hill Junior College and meets in even-numbered years. Well, that's really cool. It's still ongoing. I don't know why I had such a hard time saying the word brigade. I guess it's easier to say in your head than out of your mouth. Very interesting. Very a valiant group of folks that fought for Texas independence back there during the war between the states. So take that one with you. I was reading that and thinking, okay, back then, so they were able to raise up to 4,400 folks over the life of the brigade. Surely here in Texas now, where we have 30 million people officially and 3 million registered hunters, that Feed Bandit would be able to raise a core rabid group of bandit warriors for the defense of Texas going forward that would outnumber that 4,400. I would hope that there are enough folks out there that care enough about protecting what we have here in Texas that would be willing to talk about the ideas of what the future of Texas could possibly be like. I have a lot of beliefs in the fact that Texas will again be and will take its place amongst the most prosperous countries in the world in the future. But in order to do that, we have to reckon with a lot of things that are happening in the present. I don't know how many of y'all actually watched the last debate between presidential debate between President Trump, or former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, however you say her name. I walked away from that very interested in how it ended up going down. If you look at it from the surface, Harris seemed to have won just on rhetoric. I mean, it helped that she had a lot of aid from the debate moderators and never getting fact-checked every time she spoke, unlike Trump was. What Trump should have done is stopped, thrown everything out, and every time she spoke, he should have started by saying the word, well, let me fact-check Harris here, and then call her out where she's lying. That would have been an interesting debate. Just constantly say fact-check of her and call out the BS she was talking about. No, that's not to say that Trump wasn't saying a lot of BS too, but I tell you what, the main observation I took from that, especially if I'm thinking about it through the lens of what's best for Texas, is I look at these two folks, and first I see a Yankee versus a dyed-in-the-wool leftist from San Francisco whose parents were devout communists, or her father was at least. He taught communism. So I look at that and I say, this is the option we have here to be president over the central power that claims, I mean, if you look at it, if you really take a step back, claims ownership of Texas, more or less. That, to me, seems like an untenable situation. And obviously one that back in 1845, the founders of the Republic of Texas, many were still alive, would have never probably wanted or would have resisted joining an organization, well, at the time it still kind of was a federal republic, but seeing where it went, I don't know, they might have put a lot more caveats in the agreement to be annexed at the time. If all this were to happen, you could probably argue that the founding fathers of the U.S. and the writers of the Constitution probably never thought that it would ever get as tyrannical and overbearing as the federal government has become. So I take a step back, and what I want you to do is look at it from, okay, I live in Texas, I'm a Texan, I'm a proud Texan. What am I really getting out of my state being still continuing to be a member of the United States in the sense of being told what to do by the federal government? Why am I okay with putting up with the federal government telling my governor, hey, you can't do anything to prevent the invasion on the southern border from occurring? Yes, Governor Abbott could do significantly more, in my opinion, to prevent that from happening, and he should, but he's weak, and he is very much a politician who sways with the breeze. So ask yourself, why are we not demanding more be done down there of folks like Abbott? If we allow our sacred state to be invaded by folks that don't share the same values that we have, the same history, the history we have here, they don't care. They're coming here for freebies that are given out. Yes, the state gives out a bunch of freebies, just like the federal government gives out a bunch of freebies. But wouldn't it be much easier for you and I and folks that we know to have a greater influence on the ultimate destination, the ultimate actions that are taken here in this land that we live in, if all we had to do was fight those battles in Austin, as opposed to fighting 49 other states in Washington or Mordor, D.C.? something to think about. Short of getting back to, a situation where states are threatening to leave the federal republic that we have, which they have every right to do. And no, that was not quashed by what happened in 1861 to 1865. Why is our governor not standing up more for us? Why is he not saying, okay, look, y'all aren't doing anything at the border. What I'm doing is first off, we're sending every trooper and we're going to send, every National Guard or state guard that I have control over down there to stop folks from coming in. That's the first thing we're going to do. Why is he not doing that? Especially if the federal government comes in and says, oh, you got to take down these fences or these whatever barbed wire or whatever the situation is. He should say, no, we're not doing that. I took an oath to support my people, defend my people, so we're not going to do that. And if you try to do that, federal government, then I will arrest you. I will tell my law enforcement officers down there to arrest you if you're doing that. What's needed is some sort of conflict to really bring attention to what's going on down there. There's been a little bit. I was a little encouraged, but it's not enough. It needs to be an everyday thing. The governor needs to be coming out and having press conferences almost every night and talking about what's going on down there and what's the status of what's going on down there. It's the more and more this stuff happens, the more and more lawlessness comes into our state, the harder it'll be to root up and get rid of. So that to me is number one right now, is the state itself needs to take care of its borders. It can't rely anymore on the federal government to do that. And it shouldn't. If you go back to the Constitution as written, the only thing the federal government really kind of had a say in was who would be citizens, more or less. But it was left to the states to defend their borders. That hadn't changed. Just because the federal government probably unconstitutionally created a border patrol, a federal border patrol, doesn't mean that they just automatically have to cede over that power to them. But let's look at it. All the taxes you pay, look at your paycheck, all these federal taxes that come out, what do they go to pay for anymore? Do you feel like you're getting any kind of value from any of that? I would argue I'm not at all, actually. I would argue those taxes are actively being used to put myself in harm's way. That's the present state of affairs, I think, in Texas. Look at any story that's going on, and if it involves some sort of national legislation or something like that, ask yourself, why in Texas can't we make the decision whether or not to have that? Why do we have to agree with whatever 434, or whatever minus the number of representatives in Texas, 400 or less than 400, representatives? They decide, this is a good thing for everybody in the country, so Texas has to go along with it too. Okay, fine. Agree to do that if we were also getting something good in return. Again, I ask, what good in return are we getting? I would argue not very much. Yes, there's a lot of, say, military bases here, so a lot of money is funneled back into the state of Texas that has also been stolen originally, sent to D.C., and then funneled back here in the form of political bribes and money laundering operations. But think about it this way. What does Texas get from the federal government that it can't do itself? With the ingenuity of our 30 million citizens here, the energy that we have here, fully self-sustaining, the amount of land we have here for growing crops, raising cattle, so food, the amount of food we could create for ourselves, the amount of production here, the amount of businesses that are stationed here or headquartered here, the amount of exporting we could do here if we got rid of a lot of the useless bureaucratic roadblocks to anything getting done here. For instance, why, if we wanted to build let's say we wanted to build another nuclear power plant here, which this is the cleanest, safest form of baseload energy there is, why would we need to ask permission from Washington, D.C. for the ability to do that? I would argue that we don't. Number one, because, say, the Department of Energy and all is unconstitutional, and probably others that have to go and sign off on that, the EPA and all those are unconstitutional. So those can be those rules, those edicts and stuff. The governor, I think, should stand up and say, we're not abiding by those. The state of Texas is nullifying that law, so we're going to build this so that we can ensure that our grid never goes down again in a winter storm. You know, that our people will always be heated. Their homes will always be heated in the winter. Their homes will always be cooled in the summer. And federal government, you can't tell us one way or the other and can't do anything about it. Same with other, not just nuclear, but let's just say gas-powered plants. The governor should come out and say, we want to build more gas-powered plants, natural gas, because we have so much natural gas in the state that, by God, we may not even need to build nuclear power plants. You know, just do that, and the amount of natural gas could literally power our power grid for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's not as if we should be worrying about any of that stuff. You know, just the amount of money that is wasted and stolen from the people of Texas and wasted by the federal government, probably 10% of that could be used to have literally like a war on down grids, you know, or whatever you want to call it, Operation Power Line, you know. And what is that? Okay, that's investing this money and just overhauling everything to ensure that they'll never go down in the winter or in the summer again due to overloading or anything like that. I mean, we could do that. Stop subsidizing wind power and solar power in the state when we have so much natural gas and we could build nuclear energy. Stop subsidizing that stuff. Redirect it. Even if we don't give it back to the people, redirect it back into shoring up the grid. You know, once you have for a society, a civilization to succeed, it must have reliable energy. That's the number one. Reliable energy, because everything else can come from that. Even if we had massive drought here and water and stuff, if we had enough cheap, reliable energy, we'll just build desalination plants and pump that energy into those things. Luckily, Texas has a ton of water too, and if we needed to pump water from other parts of the state over to others where it's needed, we could build that. I'm sure there's all sorts of environmental, national EPA, you know, whatever else regulations that would probably now prevent that from happening. But the beautiful thing is those things are probably, you know, dictated from departments and bureaucracies that are not in the original Constitution, so they're unconstitutional. Hence, the state should nullify any of those things that say, no, you can't do that. There are many things that the state could do now to set us up towards a more prosperous future. One that I see as being no longer directly under the thumb of, in my mind, a foreign power in Washington, D.C., that where you have the state of New York, the state of California dictating how things should be done in Texas. That to me is completely foreign to me. And it should be foreign to you. I mean, think about it. Why does it make any sense for us to live our lives based on idiotic rules and ideas and legislations that come out of California, and then they get rammed down the throat of Congress in Washington, D.C., and then that's applied to every other state in the union? That makes no sense. Absolutely none whatsoever. So what I would implore you to do as you're going through your daily life or listening to the news or reading the news or whatever else, and it's talking about some federal law or regulation or something that's telling you how to live your life, telling you how you can or can't use your property, whether that being your land or that your money or whatever it is. If there's a shortage of something, shortage of food, shortage of energy, shortage of whatever, ask yourself why that is. Is that because of is that because of just nature and it just happens, or could it be because of some idiotic law that's been put in place either by the state or, more than likely nowadays, the federal government, that's applied to everybody, and then it causes some sort of problem that then, of course, the federal government has to come in or wants to come in and say, oh, we have this new problem now. Let us create a new law for it to fix it. And what does that do? Unintended consequences. It creates 3 more problems that then it has to fix, claim it needs to fix. The ultimate self-licking ice cream cone is government itself, but especially the overarching massive albatross layer of the federal government over Texas. So periodically in these missives, I'll probably pick some things out that I see going on, and to point out how Texas now can do things to be better, so that in the future we have a much freer, much more prosperous state being ideally a republic in Texas. But if it's still a state, fine, so long as the leaders of this state say no to the things that hurt Texas, that are unconstitutional, that hurt Texas and people of Texas, and put us in binds and whatever else. There's so much out there going on that, again, I'm going to go back to this debate, and you look at the things they're talking about. I mean, they spend time on the most mundane things, and that's to distract you from the things that are important, the things that actually affect you. And remember, as an individual, what can you actually directly affect? And that's mainly yourself. You take care of yourself first. Make sure you're fed, you have shelter, roof, etc. And by yourself, I also make that as an extension your immediate family. Make sure everyone's taken care of. Once you cover that base, then start thinking, okay, what are the other things that I can do to maybe start helping my community? And then you work your way out. But that's not to say at the same time you can't start getting the word out about how, hey, let's draw back our focus away from Washington, D.C. and what's going on in the federal government, in the United States as a whole, and let's focus on local, what's going on here in our city, county. What is my state representative doing to take back state sovereignty? Say no to the federal government. What is my state senator doing to take back state sovereignty and to say no to the federal government? Are they doing anything? If nothing, if they're just another puppet or pawn owned by some national interest, and they have goals and aspirations, ambitions of becoming a United States senator or United States representative because they want that power, then that's the kind of person we need to vote out of state office here. What we need are a lot of Texas-focused folks in the government, lawmaking folks in the government, representatives, senators. And I'm starting by asking questions down where I live. I don't ever hear anything about these folks. It's almost like they don't really even exist. They just, if they do, it's to a tiny subset of special interest folks here, and they vote. And people that vote here, they'll say, well, we're conservative, we're Republican, so we'll just vote for that person. And no one knows what they do or what they say or anything. You never hear from these people. You never hear from these senators or representatives. Especially you don't do that in the big cities. But here in the country is where you think you would. But, I mean, I'm not saying I'm in the country, but not in the middle of a big city. But we don't even really hear from these people. Like, I don't even know. They should be sending us. They should be sending us things in the mail once a week saying what's going on and what they're doing to protect and defend Texas for the present, but also our future posterity, our children. Because everything we're doing now, a lot of what we're trying to do here with Feed Bandit is recruit, as I said at the beginning, a rabid group of Texans. A group of bandits that'll be warriors for Texas, that will spread the word whenever they possibly can to reposition people's minds into thinking about Texas first, not the United States first. Because if we could take care of Texas first, then that will exponentially improve our lives here. And where this Republic of Texas could go in the future without the chains that are wrapped around it by the federal government, the debt, just all the rules, regulations, all the things that are tearing us down. Without that, just imagine how great and prosperous Texas could be. Just in 40 years. We'll all still be alive. We'll be a little older, but we'll be alive, reaping the benefits of that. And our children will be starting families then, totally reaping the benefits of the efforts that we put in now to just refocus people on Texas. Just refocus people on Texas. I mean, it's needed more now than ever due to all the folks moving in here, moving down here from Washington, New York, California, wherever. These folks really need to understand what's going on. They didn't grow up with Texas history in school. So that grasp we have on the greatness of Texas, its history, and how it made it to what it is today, it's going through our hands. We're losing it. So we have to continue to try to fight and prop that back up. And that's a big thrust of Feed Bandit, the brand, the podcast, everything we do here, and the community of hunters and outdoor enthusiasts, we believe, like us, are that core group of rabid bandit warriors for Texas. So we ask you to keep listening, to keep your head up, keep watching out for the things we're doing here. We're working on some gear that will help us get that word out, whether by spurring a conversation or just making someone think when they see it. So stay tuned for that. We're working hard on that. We're excited to get some of that stuff out. And, just to keep fighting for Texas, Texas first above all else. That's where our minds need to be, not nationally, but Texas. Texas first. All right, with that, I will leave you this episode, and really appreciate you tuning in. And hopefully I've spurred a little thinking around how you can kind of refocus your vision, your thoughts internally, take care of your family, but then what can you do to get those around you to really think about Texas and how great it can be on its own. So with that, see you on the next one. Take care.
Well, I hope the bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Anna. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.